right, welcome to Tristar Diggin. I appreciate you joining today. We are here with Brian McKinney, and Brian and I did a video about a year ago where we talked about how to have a successful excavation business, and that video did really well. We had about 37,000 views on that. A lot of good comments come in from that. What we want to talk about today is one of the most common questions that I get in the YouTube videos is how I got started, or how do I start an excavation company. Brian, being a large excavation company, he's going to give you his perspective and how he come up through the ranks, so to say, from a family business to own and operate this business. And then I'll give a little bit of insight on how I got started, and then how I run my business as well. While Brian's doing that, we're going to put a little log on the fire here. We're just having a conversation by the heater, and it's cold outside, so this is a good place to be. So go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I'm Brian McKinney. I own McKinney Excavating. I'm a second generation of the family business. My dad started in the mid-50s. Family had a logging business, and my dad bought a bulldozer to help support that business, and one person would want job done, and my dad would go and do that for them, and that job turned into another that turned into another, and Dad didn't really want to follow in the steps of the logging, I guess, and enjoyed the dozer work. So here we are today, and you know, it's that business is a hard one, man. I've been at the office since I was 3 years old, so you know, this is all I know. And in that, since I have been here, I've learned every aspect of the business. Right. I mean, when I was in the summers, I would be with the mechanic, and he and I would be working on things, you know, at a young age. And you know, you see that a lot of times, and that doesn't mean, just because you didn't grow up in a business doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Right.
But everything comes with effort. It comes off of repetition, you know, and really staying after it. And you know, those are some secrets to that success, but you've got to be willing to be all in.
Yeah.
You can't be half in.
Yeah.
So
even in the size company that I am, being an owner operator, you know, I do everything myself. And so that's one of the things you got to keep in mind when you start your own business, or you're looking to start your own business, is somebody's got to do everything because it's not going to get done if you're not doing it yourself as an owner operator, or in Brian's case, hiring people to get jobs done and make sure that's done. Just for instance, keeping receipts, tax preparation, making sure that the equipment can get to the job site. Just for instance, the current job I'm working on, the Swamp Road project, I had to figure out how to get an off-road dump truck there, a dozer, the 313 excavator, the skid steer, and the packer, and that wasn't going to get there unless I did it. So there was a day and a half of moving equipment, so you have to kind of figure out how you're going to do all those things. And in Brian's case, he's got project managers that make sure that things get done and things get in the right place. And let Brian speak about how much he wants to speak about the size of the company and some of the projects that he does. For me, I do smaller projects, anywhere from a day job up to several weeks. Brian's on jobs for a year, 2 years at a time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
multi-million-dollar contracts that he's working on. So Brian has a lot of experience on how to start a business, how to maintain a business.
Yeah, so I mean, it's you got to pick what you like. You know, I'd say even as we were sitting there talking, you know, I looked back and my dad was in the logging with the family, but then he bought a bulldozer. Then he wanted to do the bulldozer work. For me, as Dad grew, and I grew up in the business, I was doing septic tanks, and the backhoe operator that Dad had hired, he was a little bit hard to deal with sometimes. And for those of you that fool with septic tanks and put those in, especially in that time, you know, used a lot of rock, that 2-inch rock. And man, he would come up and just dump the rock in the ditch and just say, shovel that rock. And I'm like, I'm done shoveling this 2-inch rock. So I started buying scrapers. Like, I wanted to move big dirt, and so that was my passion.
Yeah.
You know, and that passion that you have is what fuels you.
Yeah.
And
right.
It fuels you when the times get hard. And trust me, they will come. I mean, as we see today, I mean, we've got 70 employees and could use 70 more if I could find them.
Yeah.
And right now, I think I've got about 6 or 7 of them here because it's cold, Nobody wants to be out in this weather, and you know, rightfully so. When it's 20 degrees, there's just some days you just need to leave the things parked.
Yeah.
So.
And the wind chill today's in the single digits or a little above single digits, 11, 12 degrees wind chill. It's blowing really hard. So the common question that I get is, how do I get started in the business? Here's the thing that I usually recommend to folks that are trying to get into business is one, when I'm talking to somebody, what experience do you have?
Yeah.
If you have zero experience and you're working a full-time job, my recommendation is get a part-time job with an excavation company, somebody like me or somebody like Brian, where you're working one day a week or on Saturday, trying to build some experience and trying to learn how to do it. If you have some basic experience, maybe running a skid steer, then if you're working a full-time job, then maybe buy a skid steer or rent a skid steer and start out that way as a part-time job. And then as you work yourself up into experience and you work yourself up into the ability to get more full-time jobs, then there's some point there's a transition you have to make.
And sometimes you're going to be working many hours. You've got your full-time
Yeah.
job and
Yeah.
you've got your part-time hustle.
Yeah.
And that part-time hustle will start to demand
Yeah.
more of you, and you got to decide at that point. That's a big jump.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing. And you know, and it's something I'd like to add to that I've seen numerous times. It doesn't matter whether you're a surveyor and you are just doing layout. You know, I had a surveyor that worked for me that he could go and do that for other people. And he said, "Hey, Brian, I want to go out on my own." And I'm like, "Well, I go with my blessing." And he's like, "Well, because I want to spend more time with my family." And I'm like, "Listen,
Yeah.
going into business for yourself is not, I'm going to be able to spend more time with my family. That comes
At some point.
at some point, but that could be years down the road. And you and your spouse, I mean, you better be on the same page if you're married and you got kids. Understand there's sacrifices that comes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, your kids are going to sacrifice your time because you're going to be stuck in the mud one day and you can't get that truck out and you got to get it out. And it may be in a creek and there's rain coming. I mean, and it will never be the perfect scenario ever. So.
And another thing that I oftentimes recommend when people ask how they get into business or start into business, again, it goes back to experience level. How much experience do you have, and what are you looking to get into? And I've actually referred several people to Brian, people with little experience or no experience. I said, listen, you've got to start out with a shovel.
Yes.
When you're wanting to learn excavation work, you can't just buy a skid steer and a mini X and a dump truck and a trailer and go to work, because you might even be able to get the jobs, but being able to accomplish the jobs and pull those jobs off takes some experience. It takes, and it's not just something that you can learn overnight. It takes some butt in the seat, so to say. You got to have that. You got to have your tail in the seat to learn how to do that. So there's a lot of guys, young guys in their 20s, that have contacted me, and they say, well, how do I get started? And as I just mentioned, find you an excavation company that's looking for workers. Go in, and I would say this, Brian can speak more on it, but I would say go into that excavation company and talk to the project manager or a PR person, whoever you're hiring. Let them know what your intentions are. Let them know what you want to do eventually. And that's to be a dozer operator or an excavator operator or a dump truck driver. But you got to go in, you got to grab a hold of that fiberglass or wood shovel, and you got to start digging those ditches first by hand and learning. That's what's important. As Brian mentioned earlier, he learned from the ground up. So when you learn to run a shovel and you work yourself into running an excavator, you not only have an appreciation for what you do, you also have appreciation for the new guys coming in that are going to be running shovels. What would you say to somebody that's totally green, no experience at all, but they want to run a bulldozer?
Man, I would say it, but it really just turns into trying to get time in the seat, and that doesn't always come. I mean, you've got to pay your dues.
You're right.
You have to pay your dues, and that's sometimes that can be a slow process, you know, and that's, you hate to say that, but you watching. You know, especially this day and time.
That's critical.
It's watching what's going on around you. You know, being attentive and not being, oh, woe is me, I'm not getting to run the dozer, I'm over here in the ditch shoveling the rock. Well, shovel the rock, be the best rock shoveler you can find.
Yeah. Because
in our current culture, and not to just go down that road, but our current culture, everybody wants to be in the pickup truck. but nobody wants to get in the ditch. And so, you know, when you do find yourself, if you're the best worker at whatever that is, you're going to get the opportunity. And your work ethic is going to be what excels you.
Right.
The work ethic then turns into experience, and that experience turns into just being a team player, man.
Right.
You know.
So if you've got several new hires and you pull up to a job site, or maybe you're driving down the road and you see your guys working, you can probably tell right quick who's going to be the next operator by the way they're paying attention to what they're doing and watching the other machines.
Yeah. Attitude has a lot to do with it. You know, when you got a guy that's willing to learn and you tell him to do something, you know, like do this, and whether you're with him and he does it or you leave and he's done it, that's a big thing, is just following the instruction. Because here's the thing, as you get experience on yourself, you go into your own business and time goes on, you'll end up in a situation where I have reasons why I do things, but I don't have time to tell you why I do it. Mm-hmm. You know, I do it a certain way, and it's not to mean, some of those are my own special or my own things that I've just developed. But over time as an owner, you take the failures and you don't want to do those again. Like
No.
You won't drive off in that mud hole.
I won't drive
You'll be
off.
like, you'll drive off in it one time,
Yeah.
and then we're like, you got to work on it for 2 hours to get it out. You're like, I ain't doing that again.
Now sometimes I might try it twice just to see if I can do it, but not the third time.
But you know, that's where the conversation comes in, that education's cost money.
Yeah.
And sometimes we go by bulldozers.
Yeah.
So,
And so to give a little insight now on how I got started, I was farming full time and had a chicken farm. We were raising about 1.5 million chickens a year, and had an opportunity to sell the farm, and it was a pretty good opportunity to sell the farm and to do fairly well doing it. And we were getting pretty close to the sale of the farm, and it was probably within a week and a half, I guess, of closing date on the farm. I guess the realization of the fact that the farm was sold was starting to hit, and we were having supper one night. My wife, she looked at me and she said, just as straight faced as she could, she said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "What do you mean, what am I going to do now?" I said, "We're going to eat supper, and then I guess whatever we're going to do." And she said, "No." She said, "You don't have a job." And I said, "You're right, I don't have a job. But I did have a skid steer, and I had that skid steer that I bought for the farm. So what did I do? I called my buddy Brian, and I said, Brian, it looks like the farm is sold, and I don't have a job." And I've been doing some part-time now, and I was farming, but I'd hired some full-time help. So I was using that skid steer to learn how to do excavation work, doing some small pads and land clearing. It wasn't pretty, but I was learning. So my call to Brian was say, Brian, I don't have a job, and what's my next move in the excavation business? So Brian and I talked about that. He said, you need an excavator in the 20,000 pound range, somewhere like a Cat 308 or something like that. It would go real nicely with the skid steer you got. And in the back of my mind, I was excited. I was going to have the money to buy it because selling the farm. I was excited about buying an excavator. But the thought crossed my mind, I had never even sat in an excavator before.
Or a bulldozer. Because I'd say go find a D5.
Yeah, that come later.
A sister.
So in the 308, so I went and tested out 308, acted like I knew what I was doing, had no clue whatsoever. I had to ask the guy to load it on the trailer for me because I wasn't even comfortable doing that. But here's the thing. I got the 308 home. I finally figured out how to get it off the trailer somewhat safely. But I had a dirt pile there at the farm before we sold it. And I got in that dirt pile, and I dug dirt, and I dug dirt, and I moved dirt, and I burned diesel and time and learned how to use that excavator. And then I had 3 dump trucks the next day coming to start hauling topsoil. So I had to learn quick. But that's how you do it. You push yourself to learn new things. So as the business started growing, I had the Cat 308 and the Cat 259 skid steer. I called Brian back, said, Brian, I'm growing. I've got bigger jobs coming in. What do I do now? And Brian said, you need a bulldozer. I said, well, what size? I was thinking maybe a D4. He said, no, get a D5. A D5 does a good bit of hard work, and it also, you can do a lot of finish work with it as well. And he said, as a matter of fact, I know where there's 2 at. I'm going to buy one, and you buy the other one. So
And it worked out.
So that's how that worked out. So I bought the bulldozer, and again, I had never run a bulldozer in my life, but I put my butt in the seat, and I learned on the fly how to do it. Watched hours and hours and hours. When he talks about watching people work, I watched a lot of hours of YouTube of watching people run a bulldozer and how to do it in an excavator. So I owe a lot of what I know how to do to the guys on YouTube that are doing this, doing videos, because that's where I learned a lot. And watching is really important.
Yeah.
And just picking up on the little things that somebody can teach you to do.
Yeah, those little things. Here's a little thing. And Sammy bought that D5. I bought the D5. We had upgraded at that time. And that's when they started going into having def that you run in the machine. For those of you that do not know and you're starting out and you want to do it as efficient as possible, don't go to the gas station and buy your def and put it in a jug and say, I'll just reuse that jug. Because here's what happens. When you do that, air gets around that def on the end of the spout.
Yeah.
Buy a jug and just buy a brand new one. Pour that def in that dozer and throw that jug away. Yeah. And if you don't use it all, don't try to save it. And then ask me how I know. Because that same D5, we got into a situation where we were reusing it as you're learning, and that stuff crystallizes, goes into the injector, and you've got a $5,000-$6,000 problem.
Yep.
There again, education's cost you money. And those things come. And so, surrounding yourself by individuals that in this business, the circle is very small, and you never want to burn those bridges. Right. And you want to try to keep relationships where you can call up when there's a problem and go, man, this is what I'm seeing. What do I do here? And those will help you keep from making a lot of costly mistakes that can really hinder your family's growth, and your growth inside the business,
And it's really important what Brian just said there is establishing and maintaining relationships. And so Brian and I had that. Matter of fact, let me go back a little bit farther. When we built the chicken farm, Brian is the guy that I hired to build the pads for the chicken house itself. So that's how Brian and I got to know each other, and then build a friendship over the years from that. So now then, because of that friendship and because of the working relationship that we have, I was doing a job probably 5 miles from where his shop is, where I'm at right now, and I was digging stumps out, and the guy said, we're just going to leave the stumps on the property here. And I'm kind of out of my area of where I can take stuff, so he changed his mind. He wanted to haul the stumps off, and so I'm left scratching my head. I'm kind of like, well, where am I going to take? Oh, Brian's shop is just down the road. Let me call Brian, because that relationship, and said, hey, Brian, I've got 15 or 20 stumps I need to haul somewhere. Do you have somewhere? Do you know somewhere where I can take these? Yeah, we're doing some filling in behind the shop. Just bring them to the shop and dump them off and have a dozer push them off. That's what relationships will do for you. Because without relationship, I wouldn't have had the opportunity. It would have had to haul them farther away, haul them to the landfill, or paid whatever. So it's important to establish those relationships. Now, I want to change gears just for a second here and talk about how we get jobs, because that's another question I get is, I've started the excavation business. I'm part-time. How do I find jobs? Well, that's all about relationships too, because when I started out and once I kind of got my feet on the ground, Brian started, there was a relationship there, and Brian started funneling me some jobs. We had a business relationship there, and then so we worked that out to where he would send me jobs. That worked excellent. So if there's a large excavation company or medium-sized excavation in your company, they're getting phone calls every single day and turning it away. Because it's either too small of a commercial job or it's a residential job that they don't do at all. So if you can build a relationship with a Brian and get to know them, and they're going to have to trust you because they're sending phone calls from their office to you. And then obviously there's a referral, there should be a commission or referral fee in that, built into that. That's a business relationship that you build there. And then from that, you begin to build your company. And that's how a lot of how the work that I built was from that. And I got so busy and I had so much work to do, I finally called over here to Brian's office to the lady that was sending me all those calls. I said, I love y'all, but don't send me anything else right now because I just got covered up. So it's about building relationships. And I'll mention one more, and then Brian can kind of fill in on what he thinks a new person or part-time person can do to build jobs. Another way that I established a relationship was with my mouth. It's talking to people.
Yeah.
I was at the Hardee's. I stopped to buy a biscuit before I was going to the job, and there was a guy standing in front of me with a concrete shirt on. He had his name up there. I think it was Bobbitt Concrete, actually.
Bobbich.
Yep, Bobbich Concrete, and had his phone number on it. I didn't get his phone number to call him. Brian, I waited on him outside.
Yeah.
When he got his biscuit and finished eating, he come outside, even though I was needing to get to where I needed to go. He came outside, struck up a conversation with him, said, hey, I'm an excavator, I do small work, I build pads, blah, 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 whatever. Told him I did. He said, that's great because I have a hard time finding people to do that. That connection right there also set me up for other jobs as well. So building a business and getting jobs is about networking and learning how to talk to people. So what would you recommend for a new guy or somebody doing part-time to try to establish to get work?
You know, I kind of go back there a little bit. Sammy mentioned on this at the time. You know, we have just grown. I don't say past, because as you and I talked, we're sitting by a heater, and I
back of the shop.
in our meeting room, and you know, we've got. I mean, when I say our campus here, I bet our campus is. That's what I call it. I mean, it's a city block. You know, and I don't mean that in a bragging way.
Right.
I'm just saying that's what happens. You grow.
Yeah.
As you grow and growth comes, don't forget the old wood heater. You know, and that's what I've tried to do, even in what we're sitting here now, is you don't want to grow past where you come from. And here's where I'm going with that is, you know, Sammy, I was getting people calling, and they were calling the name that my dad started years ago.
Right.
You know, that customer work, that's what I call it.
Right.
And so when you pass that on and people ask, go, you know, integrity to that person, and I trust Sammy. I mean, he's one of a handful that if I would send somebody that integrity, do what you say you're going to do, and then when it's all said and done, when somebody, as relationships are built, and if there's a customer that calls, the tendency that we can have is, I don't need them anymore.
Right.
And it's not that you owe them, but it's just a respect, you know. And what you don't want to do, what I'm trying to get to is, don't go try to steal that other person's customer, you know. And most anybody that would be helping you in the business would also want to see you grow. If they didn't want to see you grow, they wouldn't be helping you in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if you're starting your business, as you're growing your business, keep the relationships, man. Those relationships are gonna get you years down the road. So, and I'm gonna give you an example. 30 years ago, built a motel. Guy that was the general contractor. He was hard to deal with, right? And I was young. 30 years later, this guy calls me up because they bought 500 acres literally 600 feet down the road from my office.
Wow.
So you never know, man.
Wow.
You never know when that relationship, good, bad, you know, or ugly, will come back and rear its head because, you know, they need your services. And so those same relationships come, you know, between each other, you know, and so that's probably one of the biggest things that I would say that you really you want to hone in on. And it's getting out, you know, seeing people stop in and just say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm starting. I mean, I'm going to give a little prop here. There's a guy named Levi Dean that I'll probably send him this video. So Levi has moved here from Washington, right? And a year ago, Levi reached out to me on Facebook, and he said, Brian, you don't know me, but you know, I'd like to get to know you, you know, if there's anything. And I'm going to give this dude, I'm going to give him some respect. We built a subdivision, put the sewer line in. He calls me, he says, man, I ended up with the water line on this job. I didn't take that from you. And I'm like, nope, here, man, that's fine. I mean, we were trying to help the owner in this situation. It was just more than we could get done. And in that, he reached out. He ended up coming and riding with me for a day. And so, you know, just reach out, build the relationship, do it with integrity. Like what I'm saying, that dude right there, he wanted to make sure that he and I were square that he didn't make it even to perceive
Right.
that he was trying to run around behind.
Right.
You know, and when you do that, and I'm just saying, especially with me, man, when you do that, I'm going to feed you. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't find people you can trust that.
You can trust that.
You know, the other thing, and this just keeps going, and you know, to Sammy, I'm gonna go back a little. If you don't have a good relationship, and I'm gonna say with Jesus, man,
Yeah.
the first and foremost, you got to give him props.
Yeah.
Because I mean, and this is our word of our testimony, and the blood of the Lamb is what has overcome the world.
Yeah.
Right. I called Sammy one day when Sammy was getting started, and I said, "Hey, I need a project manager," and I know exactly where I was at in Chattanooga, the VA clinic, in a pond on a dozer. Yeah. And Sammy said, "Wow, man!" And I'll let Sammy speak to this, but that it was an amazing moment.
Yeah.
That even come on later on when Sammy made the decision to stay the course that he went,
Yeah.
and there was an amazing testimony that come out of that.
Yeah.
You know.
So that's an interesting story, and I'll just kind of preview that. I was going to go back to it. I was getting ready to buy that 308, and I was over to Middle Tennessee to look at it, and I was literally sitting in the seat of the excavator.
That's right.
Working the sticks on it, trying to act like I knew what I was doing and didn't have a clue. Well, Brian texts me and says, "What are you doing?" And I texted him back and I said, "I'm looking at this excavator you told me about." And he said, "Well, don't." This is what he said. This is what he said. No, we was talking on the phone, wasn't he?
Don't buy it.
He said, "Don't buy it until you call me." It was a text message.
Yeah.
Don't buy it until you call me. And I thought, well, I put my phone in my pocket. He just wanted to walk around it and talk about it and check the undercarriage and the pins and bushings and all that. That's what he's wanting to talk about. And so I had to check with me. I bought the machine. I was headed home. I thought, oh yeah, I was supposed to call Brian. So I stopped to eat and I called Brian. I said, "Hey Brian, what's up?" And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm on the way home with this excavator." He said, "I told you not to buy that before you called me." And I said, "Why? What in the world was that about?" He said, "Well, I was wanting to talk to you about giving you a job." And I said, "Well, why didn't you tell me that before I bought the excavator?" so like, why didn't you tell me that first before I spent all this money? And I said, "Well, what kind of job you talking about?" He said, "Well," he said, "we're growing." He said, "I'm looking to add a estimator to the business." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" Because I didn't know what that technically meant. He said, "Well, you go around, you look at jobs, bid on jobs, and help manage jobs." And he said, "My plan would be to provide you a truck and benefits and pay." And we talked a little bit about pay, how much pay was, because that was one of the questions I asked. I said, "Well, how much does this pay?" And so we got to talking about that and several different things about the job. And yeah, so here's the situation is that I had to sit there for a minute, and then I began to tell Brian a story. I said, I think I asked you if you were sitting down, actually. Yeah. I said, "Are you sitting down?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "I am." And so I told him, I said, "You're not going to believe what you just offered me." And he said, "What are you talking about?" Now he's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, we was getting ready to sell the farm. I was talking to my wife, and we had that conversation about what I was going to do next." And I said this conversation took place. I said, "You know what? It'd be this is just how God works." Exactly. I said, it would be cool if somebody caught. Now, I've got a high school education. That's it. So I was working myself into trying to get this business started. I said, "You know what? It'd be cool if somebody called me now, offered me a job riding around looking at jobs and helping manage jobs, provide me a truck and some insurance." And I had an exact dollar amount that I said in my head. And it was
within $1,000 or $2.
Yeah, it was something that a high school, it was an amount that a high school graduate shouldn't even expect, really. I mean, it was a large amount. And I said that to my wife literally in passing because I didn't expect that to ever happen. So I asked Brian, I said, "Are you sitting down?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, let me just tell you what you just did." And so I told him this conversation that I'd had with my wife, and I said, "You've literally just called and hit that within about $2,000 of the amount that I told my wife that I thought was a fantasy." And he said, "You're kidding me." I said, "No, I'm not kidding you at all. That happened." So where am I going with that? Where am I going with that is this, is that I was trying to make a decision between starting my own business and trying to get that started. Brian called and offered me an amazing job opportunity. So then I had a decision to make. What was I going to do? So we began to pray about it, talk about it, try to figure it out, what was going to do. And then I got some peace about it. And then I was talking to a person at church, and I explained the situation to them. And basically what they told me said, follow the Lord's peace. I've never had anybody say that to me ever, was to follow the Lord's peace.
Because both ways were peaceful.
Both ways were peaceful. Both ways were very great opportunities. But I really had a desire and peace in my life about wanting to start my own business. And that's why I guess I'm passionate about really trying to help people get business started and try to get their thing started, because I knew where I come from and how much desire I had to do that. So I prayed about whatever. I finally called Brian and I said, Brian, I think I'm just going to start my own business. I think I'm going to do that, and I really appreciate the job opportunity. This story goes on. So I was trying to figure out what happened in that, and why that happened, and why that I was trying to start my business. Why all this happened at the same time. And it come down to this, is that a person told me, said, God gave you a choice. Neither one was wrong.
That's it.
But God gave you a choice and gave you an option to decide what it is that you would do or what you wanted to do. And so what I learned from that was simply this, and choosing to start my own business. Thankfully I did. Brian's helped me out a lot. And what I learned from that was that even though I didn't take the job that Brian had offered me, it gave me an understanding and awareness that God heard me.
Yes. Because he does. I mean, he hears you. I mean, inside that, and here's the thing. You know, Sammy coming up, I was already established because I want to say God's provision and his direction in my life and what he had tuned for me. And I answered that call. Yeah. And Sammy has been just as much of a blessing. It doesn't matter how big you are. It doesn't matter how small you are. I put my pants on in the morning the same. Yeah. I mean, we may have a lot of employees. We may have a lot of iron. But even if you grow your business to whatever, you still got to have solid individuals around you that can come back to you when you're out of line. You know, because there's sometimes we just get weighted off in the ditches because but then there's times where when the two are gathered together, there he'll be as well. Yeah. You know?
And the scripture also says, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another, meaning that we lean on each other for guidance and direction and help. And Brian has been that for me too, in the business decision and some conversations that we've had along the way involving the Lord. But I just want to simply say this. If you're following the Lord, if you're following the direction that the Lord has in your life, he literally will. And I'm not speaking about health, wealth, and prosperity. No. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you're following the Lord in the direction and the path that he has you to go, he will open doors in ways that you never even imagined. And
you got to walk through them.
You got to walk through them. You got to have the courage, and you got to have the faith. The faith.
You got to have the faith
to walk through them. And then if a door is partially open, don't kick that door open. Don't even peek in that door. No. If God hasn't fully opened the door for you to walk through in faith, leave that door alone, because it may be a decision that you didn't need to make. But anyway, I got a little long-winded there. But basically, what I wanted to say is that in starting your own business or trying to establish your business, it's a lot about relationships and building those relationships.
It's about relationships. Stay in the course. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of days where it's just going to be hard. Yeah. And you got to have staying power to know that I got to get up and go again. And if you can't do that, if you don't have that, you either you're going to get it. And that's going to be a hard road if you're a little stubborn, and hard-headed, or B, you're going to suffer for it. And that's one of the biggest things. I had a guy call me the other day. I interviewed him for a project management position, Dude's making over 6 figures at his job right now in a logistics situation. And he said, "Hey, what would you do if you were to start a business?" I said, "I wouldn't." but in that, it's just hard nowadays, you know. But what I'm saying is, you can't just jump from one thing to the next to the next. If you're going to be in that skid steer and you're doing that work, stay in that till you've mastered that.
Right. That is great advice.
When you've mastered
That's great
that,
advice.
then you move to the next thing.
Yep.
But don't get so many different things that you can do, but you're not doing it well.
Right.
When you can't do it well, you're going to suffer for it. Your name's going to suffer. Man, the very few things that you have in life, but your name is one of the biggest ones. And you don't want to get anybody saying in a world, because the best advertisement is word of mouth.
Yes. We need to talk about that too, about advertising.
Yeah, and I mean, the best it is word of mouth, and the best the best individuals are usually going to come from word of mouth. Like, man, that's a testimony.
Yeah.
In that testimony, man, he's already been through that. You know, he's done this or done that. So, I mean, there's so many different ways, and there's so many things that you have to unlock, and it usually just unveils itself. Mm-hmm. You know, it kind of comes about, and again, relationship, coming back to those individuals and going, man, I ain't never seen this before. Well, I have, or I have not.
Yes, yes.
So
to that point, I bought and Brian had when he's working at the farm there, they're doing the farm project. They had pushed up I was blessed with topsoil. I mean, that farm was blessed with topsoil, and they pushed up huge piles of topsoil. And Brian was talking one day. He said, you need to buy a loader, and you need to buy a dump truck, a single axle dump truck, and you need to start selling topsoil. So I did. Didn't know anything about it. Never driven a dump truck before in my life. An old blue International DT 466 International dump truck. That truck was it was a danger to be on the road. But anyway, that was my first one. Anyway, so just what Brian talked about there, about having somebody you can call. So I loaded up the dump truck. I hauled it about 4 miles away from the farm. Mistake number one. When I pulled in the driveway, the homeowner, the property owner there said, just stay in my tracks. He said, back up through here and just stay in my tracks, and I'll get you around the septic system field lines.
Mistake number one. So
I started falling back up through, and all of a sudden the truck went, whoom! The driver's side tire fell completely into that septic tank field line. And I had very little experience running equipment at that time. So I called Brian. I said, Brian, I got a problem. Actually, I sent him a picture of the dump truck sitting sideways. He said, do not raise the bed on that truck. He said, do not try to dump that dirt out, because I would have turned over.
Yeah.
And so Brian talked me through that and what I needed to do. He said, go back home, get that backhoe that you've got, bring it back, dig the dirt out of it, and walk me. That was invaluable information, because I had no clue what to do. But I had a relationship. Yeah. I was able to call Brian and say, Brian, this is what I've done. I know you've been there. How do I get myself out of this mess? So that's really key.
And and here to that, as you build your business, and let's say you decide you start getting employees, one of the hardest things you do is transitioning yourself from being the person in the skid steer, in the backhoe, to managing your business. Yeah. Because as you build employees, I call it here is I'm limiting liabilities all day long.
Wow, yeah.
I limit liability to when that dump truck goes out, I already in my head go, what are the hindrances that's going to happen with him? And I'm talking about what road they take. Guys, don't go down Highway 58 that's a 2-lane road passing each other. Are we going to be hauling rock on that road? I don't want them on that road. Because of the cell phone and teenagers, and I say teenagers, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody on this phone. Yeah. And as you start, like I think you called me, Brian, I'm gonna buy me a dump truck and I'm gonna put somebody in it. Yeah. No.
I did that.
Don't. Right?
Yeah, I did that.
I mean, it's and the problem, there's so many different things that you have to take into consideration. And you got to be willing to go all the way with it. And you know, those liabilities, running the business, you spend years wanting to get out of the ditch into the truck. And when you get in the truck,
that's good.
you want to get out of it back in the ditch.
That's good.
And that's the progression. It happens. And so everything has a season in life. You know, as we sit here and talk, man, and you think, and as you get older, you know, I've got gray hairs now, man, and I'm pushing 50. And those gray hairs come for a reason. And you know, you look back and those seasons, you've got to be accepting that this is a season of my life.
Yeah.
You know, so that's hard.
Yeah. And what you said there about having all the employees and trying to risk management.
Risk management.
Risk management is what you're doing. So that's a different mindset than what I have. And we've talked. That's good for us to talk about is the mindset that Brian has and the business that he has. And we talked yesterday about the contracts that he has on the table, the contracts that he can put on the table. Blows my mind. That kind of money, those kind of projects, I have no way to even comprehend that. But Brian does. I'm satisfied. I am very satisfied working as an owner-operator, doing what I do, the projects that I do, very content with that. So here's the thing is, you've got to be content with where you are at the moment. Could I turn my business into what Brian's doing in a few years' time? There's enough work around here? Yep. I personally don't want to wake up every morning thinking about risk management. What I want to think about is the coffee I'm going to drink, getting the equipment to the job site, run the skid steer, the dump truck, whatever, get the dump truck stuck, you get it out. That's all I want to deal with. Brian is a different animal. I've rode with Brian. I've been with Brian. I don't know how it's not. I missed
my phone has been ringing off the hook.
I started saying
it's been on vibrate. And a radio. Luckily, it's 10 minutes till 12, so they're going to be on the radio in a minute. But you know, but what you're talking about, and I'll go with this, is, oh, man, what you're talking about is, as you build that thing, for me, I use this term, I've created a monster.
Yeah.
What's
the
50 chicken alligator? Right now it's about a 70 chicken alligator.
70 chicken
It takes
alligator.
70 chickens to feed that alligator every day. Every day, man. And so when you start thinking about that, it's like a freight train. A freight train is long and it's big and it's powerful. Yeah. And when that thing gets to moving, it's hard to stop it, right? Yeah. But it gets moving. And you've got to keep its momentum, and it takes a long time to slow that thing down, right? Yeah. It's the same. The bigger you get,
good way to put it.
It's harder to stop that momentum that's going. But it can. Now there's, you know, you got to take into consideration, you know, what the economy's doing. Whether you go out and buy a brand new piece of equipment, whether you fix them, and our whole society is just changing as such. Like when I grew up, I was fixing stuff. I had some broke. I'm talking. I had the oldest equipment, you know, Wright Brothers, just down the road. Robert Wright just passed away this past year. He mentored me. He told me one time, he said, Brian, best thing I can tell you to do is go buy you some Caterpillar equipment. Well, I couldn't afford it at that time. I was running Fiat Alice scrapers that I had gotten, and I'd build a relationship. But don't be afraid just because you don't have the latest and greatest GPS this.
Right.
You can build to that. Right. One thing that he told me, and I never forgot this, and I tell anybody that's watching, go get the job, then buy the equipment. Don't go buy the equipment and then go get the job. Yeah, don't do it. Because, man, you'll be sitting there going, oh my God, this thing hasn't moved in 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And that is energy that you're putting to something that you could be putting to the business in trying to build that.
You've got to have the work before you go buy the machine.
Yes.
And so that's important for me, and that's why I would call Brian and say, Brian, I've stepped up. I need to step up what I need to do. So that's how I came about buying the equipment that I have. And just to put things in perspective for you, without getting into specific numbers, the difference between Brian and I, you know, the jobs that I do, I may do a job for $5,000 up to $40,000 or $50,000 or $60,000 is kind of the threshold. Brian's doing jobs with multi-million-dollar contracts. So you're looking at one of the biggest excavators in our area, and me as a owner operator, but we have a tremendous amount of things in common.
Yeah.
And the fact that we can sit down like this beside the wood heater and have this conversation and share that with you is really important, because I know it's going to help people too in the grand scheme of things. So we'll finish this up kind of quickly. I know Brian's got to get back to work. I know I'm confident his phone battery's almost dead from vibrating in his pocket. But we'll talk just a second about growth. And then, so Brian mentioned that earlier in the video, he could add another 70 employees. That's important, and I want to share this with the people watching this video, is that Brian has opportunities for work. If you're looking for work, looking to relocate, and you've got some skills, I'm sure he needs laborers along the way, but right now he needs skills. He needs people in the trades that knows what they're doing, so he can talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of seats to fill. I have, over a period of time, just add equipment. You get this, again, a season, like we've got D10s, I mean, I've got several D10s, and, scrapers, big scrapers, the biggest that Caterpillar makes. And
huge excavators.
Huge excavators. I mean, it's, and so with that, we do need individuals, and I'm going to use this term. There's a lot of companies and the way that they structure themselves that they travel, right? And so I use the term sleeping in your own bed every night, and I hear that a lot, like I'm ready to be at home with my family. You got kids growing up, you have, a wife that's sitting there telling you, hey, you need to be involved here, right? So for us we are a small family business, which I want to talk about there a second, is if you've got kids in the business. We'll come back to that in just a minute. But we're a small family business with a corporation. I see everybody every day. There's not a number here. I know every single employee. I know them by name. And, that gets hard as you grow, and sometimes, those things go past. But we need individuals that can run the machines. And, if you want to sleep in your own bed and make really good money, because that's what our industry is going to, because there's not as many people doing this anymore, and just how it's happened, that you can make a great living for your family in doing what we do. And I'm going to come back to this real quick. I'm sorry, because I am very ADD. And you have to be when you're running your own business. Yeah. I mean, you got to be thinking about this and what's going on at 4 o'clock today. But here's what I'm saying. For those of you that are in the business, and maybe you're second generation, maybe you're the first generation, and you're coming towards the end of your career, and you got a kid that's in the business. Just because it's your passion doesn't mean it's theirs.
That's a good point.
And man, you've got to really remember that. My son is in the business right now. My daughter has been in the business. She left it, got a degree in accounting. She got an opportunity to go work in an accounting firm, and I'm like, you need to go. And for me, I've always been here. I've worked for other people, doing jobs, but I've never been anybody else's. I've always been the boss, if you will. My dad was the boss, but I'm talking about to know what it was like to work for somebody else. But, my son tells me all the time, Dad, your idea of this thing and what mine is two different things. Because Luke is like you. He's like, man, I just want to be with my babies, with our my 2 grandkids, and I want to drink my coffee. I want to work on my truck. And so, there's some bit of that that you try to go, all right, son, what do you want to do? And then from that doesn't mean it's insurmountable if you're in a big business. So, like for me, I'm dividing it up in divisions. I've got individuals that handle different divisions of the company.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it be the shop, whether it be the field, whether it be the office portion, and those managers manage that so that you don't put all that weight. Because for me, it all rested on my shoulders, and I through sheer will and I'm just going to see this thing through. We grew, and I had a lot of people that were good around me, but you can't do it by yourself.
Right.
So
right, you got to learn, and see that's where I would have an issue growing a business, is because I'm a little bit.
Nobody's going to handle your money the same as you're going to.
Yeah.
Ever.
I guess I'm very, very picky about the way things are done, and you got to let some of that go.
Got to let it go.
You got to let some of that go.
You don't want to ever use the term that's the cost of business, because mistake's a mistake, and you don't want to make the same mistake over and over again, right?
Not more than twice.
Not more than twice. There's sometimes, anyway, that's a different subject, but yeah. But choosing who you have as part of your team, as part of your staff. Just because they say they've done something, that doesn't mean they know how.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got to have somebody that's willing to take your back, and people have different opinions about how you should do things. And you've got to have people surrounding you that buy in. You know, if you watch football, you watch sports, and despite where you're at in Tennessee, Alabama, whatever, you know, you look at some of the stuff like Nick Saban talks about. I love Nick Saban. You know, I'm not much of a particular team, but that dude right there, he knows how to motivate people, but you got to buy into his system. And like to him, he had a system. This is how we did it. We don't waver from that. And there was success that came from it, you know, so anyway.
And when that's your business and when it's on your shoulders, you gotta, I guess you gotta kind of revisit that plan too, because if things aren't working well,
it gets out of line. And it's a slow fade. You know, you just allow things to happen because you don't want to make this employee mad. But sometimes you just got to get up on the stump and go, no, stop. Just bring this thing back. And you know, as you've seen maybe on one of the videos, I've got the insanity thing on. So that's my daughter's volleyball travel thing that we're involved in. But where I'm going is Vince Lombardi, Packers coach years and years ago, every year they won a championship, he'd come back, he'd hold that football up. When they started the season, he said, this is a football. He would always bring them back. Oh. And sometimes in the business, as you're growing, you're like, it gets away from you.
Yeah.
And so you're like, hold on, let's bring this thing back and get by the wood stove a minute and let's go again.
Right.
And so those are you've got to feel it. You've got to see it starting to drift away. And then when there's disunity, you better start getting in that, you know, because disunity tears the house down.
Yeah.
You know, so that's in the growth. That's when you got multiple facets of the business. So
that's right. One of the things that, going back to employees, one of the things that Brian, I think we mentioned yesterday in the video that we did, is a mechanic.
Yeah.
Really needing a mechanic. So you talk a minute about that as we wind this down.
Yeah, I mean, we need some mechanics. I need some more individuals to help, because in our industry, the individuals that have been doing it are starting to retire, and there was a period of time where we didn't focus our children on that this is a valuable trade.
Yes.
And so there's a
couple generations.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the word. There's just a lack. There's a lack of qualified individuals. There's a lot of people that are parts changers. Yeah. There's not a lot of people that know how to mechanic.
You needing mechanics that can work on D10s and large excavators and do that kind of work.
And even at that, now that's not to diminish the fact that technology has taken over in our industry.
Right.
There's a lot to be said that if you know how to work the computer programs, and there's different companies, Caterpillar, John Deere, that offer programs for you for these individuals that you're in high school right now and you're coming out and like, I don't know what I want to do, but I play video games. Well, there's some avenues you can go on. You know, go see that John Deere dealer, go to that Caterpillar dealer, you know, Komatsu. I mean, and I'm saying these big ones. Caterpillar offers programs that you can go in and they are begging for mechanics. They'll send you to school. They will give you a job. And then at the end of it, give you a full-time position as you're working through your school and pay for your school. Wow. So, I mean, there's avenues out there. And if you get in touch with Sammy, you can reach us on our website. I can help pass some of that stuff along, you know.
And that's the best way to get a hold of Brian is McKinneyExcavating.com. And what's the office number?
423-649-0081.
And I'll put that on the screen. And I appreciate Brian taking I know it was a pain and struggle, and he's got a lot of phone calls and text messages to answer. Appreciate him taking a little bit of time out of his day to help us and to help you understand what it takes to start a business.
And something too is that Sammy and I have talked about this, and I think for us, you're gonna I think see more of us. We've gone long-winded. We've talked about a lot of things, but we want to look at trying to have more of a podcast kind of look, sit down. If you've got something that you've got questions on, reach out to Sammy, reach out to me, and let us try to answer some of those.
Yeah, and to that point, what we've kind of talked about is maybe once a month. We'll kind of tailor it here or there, what we need to do. Maybe once a month doing a sit-down podcast style video like this. And that's really, it really dependent upon you,
Yeah.
the people that are watching this video. Did you enjoy what you saw today? Did you learn something from it? And just as Brian said, the best way that you can reach out to us about some ideas or thoughts that you have or questions is to comment that. Comment that in this video. I'll be taking notes of your comments and your questions, and we can address those in future videos. And I'm going to try to talk Brian into doing a YouTube live where we go live. There's no editing skills. There's no editing done. It's live, and we answer questions online as they come in. So
that would be good.
Yeah,
we
cool.
would be good. Yeah.
So I hope y'all enjoyed this. And Brian and I have already mentioned a little bit about the Lord. That's the most important decision
Amen.
that you can make in your life, is to trust in Him as your Lord and Savior. That is it. That is the foundation for life, is our faith and trust in Him. If you haven't done that, it's the most important decision you can make. Not just today, but right now, before the video ends, is place your faith and trust in Him.
And I want to just go out on a limb here too, because this is new to us. Sammy and I have talked about this for a few years now, but in those comments, if you need to reach out, if there's something that's on you, man, don't hesitate to ask. It's the same as going to ask if you've got work for a bulldozer.
Right.
If you don't know him, if you don't understand what we're talking about, reach out.
Yep. Yeah, that's
the most important thing.
Yep, that's the thing. So God bless you, and I appreciate you watching. Until next time, maybe we'll have some. He's got a lot of cool toys over here. He bought a whole crate of old Tonka toys, and he set up a little podcast area, coffee bar thing. So that's going to be pretty cool.
See it.
So God bless you, and see you next time.